Hi there, I'm Tom, and all you lucky people get to listen to me talk about life, the universe, and everything for the next undefined amount of time, along with Alex.
Hello.
Today we will be talking about the wonders of technology before quickly getting distracted and moving on to something much more interesting.
As what hopefully will become usual.
Yeah, that's kind of the plan with this, and that's kind of the everything section of the title. So,
Well, it's Life, the Universe, and Games is the actual title, I believe, but
oh yes, I'm getting
near enough.
I'm getting confused with
the reference
my...
is obvious.
Yeah, I'm getting confused with my quote and the actual original quote, which is actually much better. I'm just plagiarising a dead man.
Yep.
Okay, so I think the best place to jump off this would be to start with this very podcast. Right now we are two people sitting in a room and recording directly to a computer. And then with a few clicks of a button later, I will edit the entire podcast. And that's when the really interesting things happen. I will magically put a image next to the audio. And then I will upload it to the internet. And it will... the internet itself is just massive. Let's start there, actually.
Yeah, we decided to go all philosophical with this one, because the title is obviously Life, the Universe, and Games, and...
This is kind of the universe, I think.
Yeah, it's the wonders of technology, I believe.
It's kind of like the universe when you look at the technology and how everything works, and then it's life when you look at how it affects us. And not many people know actually how the internet works, and even fewer stop to appreciate how miraculous that is, really. We talk about data packets and bits and bobs and so on, and bytes and cookies, but what do they actually mean? I mean, I've studied networking, so I've got a pretty good idea, but it still amazes me that tiny bits of information go all the way across the country to my internet service provider, and then they get either beamed up to a satellite somewhere or sent straight across the Atlantic Ocean, and they land on Google's main servers, and even then they get transported all around the world so that they're locally available, so that the buffering times are lower.
I think the danger is the more you know, the less you appreciate it as well. Because it just becomes natural. It becomes, especially with us who are this sort of mid-tech generation, we've seen it grow with us, but a lot of it is we take for granted, as you say. We just learn to live with it.
It's there, it's always been there, it's never going to go away. It's like oxygen. It's such a vital part of our life that we would find almost impossible to live without it.
I mean, a lot of people forget that, 20 years ago, not everyone had a computer in their house. Not everyone had access to this mass that is the internet.
Well, I mean, computers started taking off, really, personal computers started taking off in the 70s, so...
Well, yeah, but my point is I remember... I mean, you talk to a lot of people of, especially our generation, and everyone remembers getting their first computer. Yeah. I mean, some people who had maybe offices and things had computers, and personal computers and things, and people who maybe did work from home had computers and things, but...
Well, even not even working from home, it was the hacker culture who had computers in the late 70s and early 80s. That was what drove everything. That's what created Apple, was the hacker culture, and it's what drove Microsoft as well. I mean, you hear some of the tales from the early days in computing, and it was such an amazing time. The very fast version of Microsoft Windows, well, it wasn't Microsoft Windows at the time, it was just Microsoft DOS. It was written in 24 hours by Bill Gates and the rest of a very small team, and they didn't actually have the hardware to test it on. It was built to spec for the company, and they built it to spec on a different machine, and the very fast time they could see it running on the actual hardware was when they demonstrated it the next morning, and they had to pray that nothing went wrong, and it didn't, and they actually won the contract.
In high contrast today, I mean, I was reading an article earlier today about how Windows 10, they think they're being too conservative in the testing. A lot of people have been complaining that the fast release cycle isn't fast enough.
Yeah, but I can kind of see the the purpose of a slow release cycle. It's better to get your testers working on something that works so that they point out the stuff that doesn't work.
Well, yeah, I mean, in this specific example, I mean, you have the option under settings to adjust to a slow or a fast release cycle, whereas they're pretty much the same at the moment. And
yeah, but you can't really blame Microsoft. If you look at everything that they're trying to do here, it's quite amazing.
Oh, yeah. I'm just putting that as a point of contrast. But again, going back to the internet, one of the biggest things that I like to stop and think about at times, and one of the I've heard it paraphrasing from things I've heard in many places, but we carry around, most of us these days carry around a device in our pocket that has access, a smartphone that has access to mobile internet. Wherever we go, providing we have signal, of course, but wherever we go, we have access to the internet, which is most of human knowledge.
Yeah, and
if you don't know something, pretty much anywhere you are, you can find it out.
And the average smartphone is 10 times more powerful. This is an actual fact. It's 10 times more powerful than the computers that landed the lunar module on the moon the first time.
I heard that quote a few years ago. Probably more times than that now.
Yeah, and talking of space landings and stuff, do you know how much it cost NASA to edit one line of code? One single line. $1 million to edit one single line of code. That's how much testing and...
Well, that's to do with dependencies and stuff, isn't it? It's to do make
sure
that...
it's to do with a very bad coding culture that existed, the waterfall model. Basically, it's... Someone wrote an article with this waterfall model because they wanted to show it how exactly bad it was, but everyone took it the wrong way and decided that that's the absolute best way to do things, and... The government especially, the US government especially, took it on and insisted that every single coding project used this model. And so newer techniques for writing code like Agile and Scrum and so on, they didn't get picked up so quickly. And it's only now starting to see a real benefit.
The way these things are taken is often taken, the way these things are put is often taken wrong. It's like things like... Schrodinger's cat was originally a parody. It was a mockery of the concept, and it's been taken as used as an example to demonstrate it these days.
Well, kind of. It was written by Schrödinger, of course. He was talking in letters with Albert Einstein, and he wrote it to show that the Copenhagen explanation of quantum mechanics wasn't applicable to the bigger scale, everyday life type of things, and in fact, nowadays the Copenhagen model isn't used so much. It's kind of fallen out of favour, mainly due to the exact reasons that Schrödinger was talking about. But Schrödinger's cat is just a very, very easy way to explain something very, very complicated. So,
and people jump on these. It may well have originally been meant in a almost discreditory sense, but it's become something that people can understand, people can recognise, and...
Well, I talked at the beginning about plagiarising dead authors. We have unfortunately very recently lost Terry Pratchett, but...
Sir Terry Pratchett.
Sir Terry Pratchett, of course. That's probably the only time I haven't said Sir in front of his name in the last few years, but my point is, he wrote something in one of his Science of Discworld books called Lies to Children, and basically it's the concept that in order to understand a very, very complicated subject, you don't teach someone the very, very complicated subject. You teach them what they can understand in the context of what they know. And
I believe there's a quote from Hitchhiker's Guide, appropriate considering our name. I believe it's Slatty Bartfast says something along the lines of, he asks him... It's something like, is that true? And he says no, but it's a very good lie, or something like that.
Yeah, or it's a very convenient lie.
Very convenient lie. I can't remember the exact quote, but something along those lines. And,
we could sit here quoting authors all day, but yeah, we've kind of lost our place.
That's part of the fun.
So, technology, yes. I think the main thing about technology is that it's become so ubiquitous. It's almost like we've had a second industrial revolution and no one really noticed it. And that's kind of... it's visible in terms of labour, because you are getting computers and robots doing more and more of the labour in the same way that machines did back in the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, we get this loss of jobs, and you get all these sort of complaints. I mean, especially the sort of lower class of papers are blame the immigrants, and it's like, no, maybe blame technology.
Yeah,
it's as sort of as ironic as and overused as it is very much true in a lot of senses. I know for a fact in a lot of instances you see these things downscaling, these places downscaling because they've replaced with a newer system and they don't need the people anymore.
Yeah, but blaming technology isn't really the right way to go.
Yeah, maybe not blame technology is the wrong turn of phrase, but
the thing is, during the
choice of phrase.
During the Industrial Revolution, you had the Luddite movement, who was certain that the technology was the issue here, and they disliked the technology and they wanted the technology and the machines to disappear. But in actual fact, the Industrial Revolution created more jobs. It's just different kinds of jobs, and as long as your society can adapt to that and change in a way that allows people to train for those jobs and to go after and pursue those jobs, then the technology revolution, just like the industrial revolution, could be a very big boon to society.
I think there's a big key in there is the training. There isn't a lot of training given on computers. I know people of our generation who grew up with computers who cannot use them very well. And that shocks me because, as I say, we've grown up with them to a certain extent. And there is more training slowly being worked into schools and things, and they are starting to teach these good practices. But basically, they teach them Microsoft Office, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, things like that. And some of the more advanced features and the simple uses, things like going into control panel and changing your settings, things like that, and bug fixing computers, things like that, it should be more of a practical skill taught to people.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. Do you know what the BBC Micro is?
No.
It's it's a very old computer. I think it was available in the 80s or 90s. Basically, it was a personal computer, a very cheap personal computer that was produced in part by the BBC, hence the name. And it allowed people to learn programming and just do basic tasks and get familiar with personal computing. And this BBC Micro is credited with an uptake in personal computing in the UK. It's one of the driving factors of our computer generation. And very recently, in fact yesterday, I was reading an article which is saying that they're going to be bringing out a very similar version of the Micro project. It's called Micro something or other, I can't quite remember the name, but they're going to be supplying computers very much like the Raspberry Pi to, I think they said they wanted to put one in the hands of every child entering secondary school education in the next year.
Sounds like a nice idea.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we need to be doing, because that will be teaching them programming and system management and all sorts of things like that.
I saw a project on Kickstarter, I believe it was called Kano or something like that. Or I don't know how you pronounce it, but Kano anyway. And that was something similar. That was based on the Raspberry Pi, and it was a kit designed for kids, and it was all young or sort of children to teenagers learning about computing. And the kit itself came with a Raspberry Pi, all the necessary components, and case, speaker, HDMI cable, wireless keyboard, mouse, touchscreen thing, and custom OS designed to be simplified and designed to teach kids a lot of these basic... I mean, the idea was that you built the project up from... You had the components, you put them together via physical instructions, and then when you launched it up, you could then go into the technical side of it and learn the computing side and learn things like... Start to learn programming. I mean, it started off with basic programming like...
shell scripts, I imagine.
Well, coding blocks, where you have these blocks, and you can go. I haven't actually looked into it much myself, but I'm aware that it's. I looked at the project, as I say, and you could put these things together and sort of put the blocks together to make different things. And
very visual programming type thing.
Something like that, yeah. And as I say, I love the concept, and things like that, as you say, is the way to teach kids these things. That isn't widely available at the moment.
Well, it's a great thing to do with the Raspberry Pi because that's exactly what it was intended for. It was developed, it was either Oxford or Cambridge University who developed it, but they developed it with the idea of putting it in classrooms and having it as a very simple, instructable thing that people could play around with and mess around with and just mess up and break, and then you just flash the operating system again and it's ready to go for the next class. And so it's good to see that there's people putting these things in classrooms and doing similar things in classrooms, and I think that's really going to drive our computer science industry in the UK.
Yeah, it would certainly help, as I say, because I have a great interest in technology and I know quite a lot more than most people, but I feel things like that. I chose not to do computing in school and I kind of regret it because, as I say, I know quite a lot, but there are a lot of things in that sort of category that I would like to be able to do, and
well, you aren't really missing much because we didn't have computer science in our school so much. We had information communication technology, and I did it up to A level, which is up to it's kind of 16 to 18 year old. Not sure what that relates to in America, but it was boring as hell. It was all about the specifications and
I agree with that to a certain extent, but particularly these things these days is if you want to learn more, often these things are the way to invest time into it, and once you start investing time into it, you then expand your knowledge in your own time, whereas I was more focused on other things at that age, and specifically in my case, sciences and things, and because at the time it was just something I enjoyed more, but I haven't gone into a science-based industry, so that I feel that time could have been better spent had I focused it on something I would have got more personal benefit from, rather than something that just interested me at the time, if that makes sense.
But I think the ICT lessons in our school it almost drove me away from computing, because it was like there wasn't really all that much interesting stuff in it. It was the legal framework and it was the really low level stuff. You didn't actually ever do anything with computers except watch a PowerPoint presentation, and some of it is interesting, and I have kept some.
It is partly to do with the way it's taught, I suppose, but
oh yes, but especially the IP type stuff, I've brought that with me and I've learned more about that, but it didn't really teach me anything to do with computers so much, and I took the time myself to teach myself about computers and programming and creating websites, which is what I do at the moment, and all sorts of things there. But
I do think the problem with choices in life is that they do make your brain is geared up to learn at a time when you're too early so much in this day and age to decide what you want to do. But anyway, we're probably getting into boring stuff now. We should probably talk about something more interesting than...
Well, I was just going to say that I saw a fantastic quote the other day, which I completely agree with, that I said, don't teach kids what to think, teach them how to think.
Yes, I do think that's...
That's kind of the thing that differentiates a technically minded person, or someone who's good with computers, so to speak, and someone who isn't good with computers. We don't know the answers. We don't have everything on a magic carpet type thing that's handed to us automatically. We just learn how to think about problems, and we learn how to solve problems, and the more you do that, the better you'll get at actually finding out what the problem with computers actually is.
Yeah, and I think that quote is very... it hits home to anyone who's ever tried to teach anyone else to use a computer, because the number of times like, well, how did you do that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. You have to know the way of thinking. You may not know exactly where something is on a computer or how to work with it, but if you have the right way of thinking, you can pretty much drop you into any computing situation, and you can, maybe with a little bit of Googling, but know roughly what you're looking for, roughly what the sort of things you need to do.
And you also a very important part is that you need to learn how to search Google.
Yeah.
Because there's very specific ways that you can phrase something, and you'll get completely different answers if you phrase it differently. And sometimes
keywords and things, yeah.
Yeah, just phrasing it like, if you say, how do I do X, then you're not likely to find much. You may have a blog post or something where someone's phrased the title cleverly, but you'll get less hits for that. You'll get more hits for how to do X, because that's much more likely to be what someone writes when they put a web page up. That's what they'll write as the title, how to do X.
Yeah, likewise, again, if you're Googling, can I do X, you might find some forum posts and things, whereas if you type how to X...
Yeah, you'll find how to do it.
You'll either find how to do it, or you'll find a bunch of posts saying...
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
And then you'll find one post right at the bottom that says, well, actually, if you do X, Y, Z, and then you see in the very specific way, you can kind of hack it, but I wouldn't advise it.
Or someone saying, yeah, it's really easy, you do it this way, and it's something completely different because they've completely misunderstood the question.
Yeah. Oh, the internet. It allows everyone to communicate with no context whatsoever. No body language either. That's a major thing on the internet, because human beings communicate a lot with body language, and in fact, surprisingly, males communicate with body language more than they communicate verbally, which is why you find a lot of males who will say that they're not comfortable speaking on the phone, because they don't have those visual clues, and it's much harder for them to work out through the vocal clues what's going on and what they should be reacting to.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can see it when you walk down simply by walking down a street and looking at people. You can tell the sort of people who are quite sort of forward and get out my way, or the people who are sort of quite sort of slidey through the crowd, quite sort of I don't want to draw too much attention, or the people who are kind of nervous and sort of walking a little bit out, sort of in the away from people in back corners and things.
Yeah. And you don't even notice it consciously, you just kind of subconsciously adapt your behaviour to suit them. Like, if there's someone who's going to walk in a straight line, then you're more likely to sidestep them than if there's someone walking down the street who's moving to the side already. But it's interesting because I've never really thought about it like that. I don't like talking on the phone. I absolutely detest it because it's just so hard for me to focus without the body cues. But I'm absolutely fine talking online, and I've never really thought about the distinction before. I think...
Yeah, it's almost like... I mean, it's the age-old argument how the whole flaming on the internet, and how when there's no face to speak to, people are much more brutal with the things that they say and things, much more
Well, there's been theories
malicious
about that for a
things.
very long time, and I kind of agree with that, but there has been at least one study that I've seen that says, actually no, people who are absolute assholes online are just as likely to be absolute assholes offline as well.
Well, yeah.
It's just on the internet, you
draw more attention to them, I believe, is...
well, there's so much...
Give them an audience.
There's so much noise on the internet that you can't focus on everything, and unfortunately the human mind focuses on the negative stuff a lot more than it focuses on the positive stuff. You ask any YouTuber and they'll say that they can read, well, basically anyone who has a comment system underneath their work, they'll say they could read 1,000 or 1,000,000 positive comments, and then they read the one negative one and it sticks with them all day. And a big barrier to doing anything creative on the internet is learning to drown out the unconstructive negative trolls. Which isn't a great thing to say. I mean, they say to kids, and I've heard this more than once, if someone's bullying you, just ignore them. That does not work. It doesn't work in real life, but it does work on the internet because there's so many more distractions for them, and it almost feels wrong saying that, because basically what you're saying is stop paying attention to them and they'll stop paying attention to you. They'll find someone else to bully. And that doesn't seem like a solution to the problem. We've got to kind of find a way to deal with trolls online in a much more effective way than we are.
Yeah, to be honest, it's a very hard thing, a very hard category to think about, a very hard thing to do. A lot of forums and things like that have... ways to report people for unconstructive comments and things, let's say, or
breach of terms and conditions,
breach of terms and
harassment.
conditions. But it's a very fine line to draw, particularly with things like games. You find this a lot. When you play an online game, you'll often get this competitive banter. Now, there's a very fine line between competitive banter and malicious intent, sort of things that can be genuinely hurtful and stuff and cause some serious problems. And it's hard to distinguish that and to draw a line. I mean,
I think on online games there's a very simple way of drawing that line, because in an online game you have an avatar representing you, and so you can usually distinguish things which are directed towards the avatar and things which are directed to you personally, and anything which crosses that line, anything not directed to the avatar, is meant to be hurtful and malicious.
Maybe, but simple things like, oh, your aiming sucks or whatever. Do you know what I mean? That's a very mild thing to say, for example. I would consider, if someone said, oh, your aiming sucks, you can't hit me or whatever, that is meant towards the individual, but I wouldn't consider that hurtful or anything because of the almost the mildness of it, if that makes sense.
Well,
that's just simple banter or whatever.
So talking about the aiming is keeping it within the context of the game, so I'd say it's more directed at the avatar. When you direct something at the individual, you take the conversation away from the game.
But again, I mean, this contrast of how we have to talk about, how we have to discuss where you draw that line, shows exactly how blurry it is. It's, as I say, it's very hard to regulate these things. I mean, I guess the only real thing to do is, in a lot of situations, it's easier in things like forums and stuff, because you have an overseeing moderator who can look at it and say, oh, right, this is obviously hurtful. And as in future times, you may well have a sort of AI moderator type thing working in online games where obviously they're working on these sort of almost single-minded AIs.
Yeah.
It's very hard. I mean,
but
we had this
here's the thing. In a forum, it's a lot easier, not only because of the moderator, because in an online game you can report someone, and if enough people report them, they'll get examined. In a forum, it's not just the moderator which makes the difference, it's the context. You can look at every single thing a person has posted, and over the course of a couple of days or a week or so, you get to know their personality, how they talk, how they phrase things, and how often they actually mean something maliciously, and you get a bigger context of it. You don't get that in a 10-minute game of Halo or Call of Duty or something like that. And I think that's the big problem. And the other thing, of course, is you don't get body language, so except for teabagging, which probably best not to use that body language in general conversation.
Yeah.
But that's the big problem. Lack of body language and lack of context. And someone may just be literally joking, and they may say your aim sucks to every single person who comes along, and they may enjoy it as banter, but I don't know that when someone says it to me, and I'm just going to mute them if they carry on saying it.
Yeah, it's a complicated topic.
The other thing, of course, is that not as many as you think, but a significant portion of online gamers who use voice chat are kids, basically.
Oh,
kids
yeah,
and teenagers. And they themselves haven't learnt the boundaries. They haven't learnt how to communicate with people. They haven't learnt what may be hurtful to other people. And I think that's a big thing. I think if you had a better way of saying, okay, I don't want to play with anyone under this age, or saying that, okay, anyone under the age of 18 has to play in basically their own bracket where they only interact with those people.
Which is very hard to do because
people lie.
People lie. I mean, the number of, as you say, kids who are playing these games that are
18 years.
15, 18 rated. I mean, Grand Theft Auto is an 18 rated game.
Yeah.
And the number of sort of younger children who play it, who have it, who are bought it by their parents. I mean, that's a completely different topic altogether, whether they should or shouldn't be playing it. But the point is that they do. And
well, here's the thing. There is a legal system in place to prevent game stores in most most places I know of. In the UK, I know that's a thing, and in America, I know it's a thing, and I think in most of Europe, it's a thing. There's legal systems in place so that if a game is 18 rated, then it cannot be sold to anyone under the age of 18. And it's kind of like alcohol. You can't sell it to someone if you know they're going to give it to someone under 18. Although that may be different in different areas. But there is that check and balance in place, and I think the digital age is kind of messing with that a bit, because...
Yeah, online purchases are very hard to regulate. I mean, the simple fact that you have a credit or debit card, or
have access to a credit
or
or
have
debit card.
access, yeah, indeed, even have access to a credit or debit card. But I remember being in school and having a debit card given for my account. It was originally given as a cash card, but they upgraded it to a debit card part way through.
Well, you're allowed a debit card from the age of 16, I believe.
So the simple fact that you have a debit card, they don't do age checks on the card itself, so as soon as you have a debit card, you can go online and make online purchases and lie about your age and things. And...
I think they can actually check with the bank. When they're doing the checks on the validity of the card, they can request an age. Because your age, your date of birth, of course, is registered with the bank, so they can provide that information easily. But I'm not sure how many people do that, because most websites have their own age-related things in place. I know that Steam does, and Steam's one is really easy to get around, but...
Steam is, tell me what's your date of birth.
Well, here's the thing, because by entering a date in there and clicking continue, you are entering into a legal contract with Steam. And it's the same with websites. In their terms and conditions, Facebook says, don't make an account before you're 13 years of age, and that's entering into a contract.
I mean, the downside of this is this is the argument used by these people who argue for the Orwellian 1984 future, is by controlling these things, by maybe storing all your biometrics on a government controlled database, you can then track the individual, which would make control of these things much easier. But then the sacrifices you have to make for that control.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any person in the country who actually trusts their government, at least in the UK right now. And that's not going to change anytime soon. And until you've got that trust, you can't then suggest that you put these systems in place, because you don't know that they're not going to be abused.
But the problem is trusting the government and voting for a system that seems on the face of it, when uninformed, to be beneficial. I mean, the prime example that our British Prime Minister David Cameron has recently tried to
ban encryption.
But ban encrypted communication. Things like...
Well, he hasn't tried yet. He's actually come out and said that he will be... if he gets back into power in the next election, which probably won't happen, he will ban encrypted communications, all encrypted communications in the UK.
Things such as WhatsApp, for example, would become against the law.
I don't focus on WhatsApp. I focus on your bank account. Anyone who has online banking uses encryption to access their bank account.
I believe since it's been clarified that it meant encrypted communication, personal messaging communication, rather than encrypted communication in general.
Right, encrypted messaging instead of encrypted communication. But say, for example, Skype. I'm pretty sure, well, at least I hope Skype encrypts the voice and video traffic. They would have to make exceptions in the UK, and then anyone can listen in on my Skype calls.
But things like, let's say you're running a business and you want to have a chat with your business manager or something, then you would want to communicate with them. You might want to transfer sensitive details over to them. Now, if you can't do that in a encrypted manner, that could potentially be susceptible to interception.
And the other thing, like, you log into Facebook using encryption, and if you don't use encryption, well, you've got to, because that's how Facebook works now. But if you didn't use encryption, then anyone could snoop in and post stuff as you.
The face of it, to the uninformed, is David Cameron is telling people that he wants to ban these encrypted communications so they can intercept terrorists and things like that communicating. Now, I'm not being funny, but people who are
planning to
do that will find ways around it.
Well, it's not hard to find ways around it. You just use an encrypted messenger. That's it. Like, it's not hard to put encryption on a service.
So, as I say, his attempt to ban these things, that he, on the face of it, to the uninformed, seems, he's trying to stop terrorism and things. Excellent. But, as I say, the pure and simple fact of it is it will impact the lives and the privacy of a lot of important things completely outside of this illegal scope that he's looking into.
Yeah, I think the main thing is going back to what you were saying earlier about a lack of education in technology, because it's blatantly obvious that David Cameron has no idea what encryption actually is, how it's used, how it benefits the UK, and how it keeps us safe and secure from the terrorists who he's trying to shut down. And it's obvious that no one in his PR team had that knowledge either, because they let him go out and make a speech that said this thing. So, is he just not listening to his technical advisors? Is his technical advisors just yes men? And the other thing is, the general populace doesn't know these things either. They don't know what encryption is, they just know it keeps them safe, and if the government says it's not keeping you safe anymore, then they're going to vote to ditch it.
Yeah, so it's very lack of education can be a very dangerous thing.
And a little knowledge can be even more dangerous.
Indeed.
And that's kind of where we're at the moment. People have a little knowledge in that computers do stuff, and certain parts of computers do stuff, but they don't have the level of knowledge which says this is how and this is why and this is what happens and this is how you fix it and this is how you keep it safe.
And unfortunately, the people running the education system don't know that they don't know this.
Well, the education system in this country is broken. It has been for a very long time, and it's not going to be fixed anytime soon. We are getting people who have not reached maturity yet to make decisions that will affect their entire life.
Back to what we were saying earlier about choosing the courses you take in school and things.
Yeah, I mean, like, in the UK at least, you do GCSEs at, what's year 10? That's 15? 15 to 16?
Yeah, usually the age of 16.
Yeah, so you've got to decide what courses you're doing for your GCSEs a year or two before that. You're placing, like, this is 14-year-olds, you're placing their entire future on 14-year-olds.
13-year-olds for some of them who are near the younger end of their year.
And especially the ones doing fast-track type stuff. And it does affect their entire future, because the subjects they do in GCSEs are probably going to be the subjects they do in A-levels over the next 2 years after that. And the subjects they do in A-levels will have a massive effect on what they do at university, because
a lot of A-levels have a requirement of having a GCSE in a specific category.
And the same with university. You've got to have experience definitely in the subject. So you're asking 13, 14-year-olds to decide what degree they're going to make, essentially, what degree they're going to study for. And even when I was 18, I didn't know what degree I wanted to study for. If I had my time again, I would have changed my focus and picked a different university. And really, I've said this to so many people who are approaching university and saying, well, I've got no idea. Should I go to university? Is it going to benefit me? Is it going to... And I give the same answer to everyone. Don't go there to learn. I mean, obviously, don't not learn, but don't spend, $3,000 a year now? Don't spend $3,000 a year on the education. You'll get that, and that's good, and that's fantastic, and you'll learn something, but do it for the life experience, for living alone, for sorting out your finances, for learning nutrition, which you will learn nutrition, otherwise you're going to die. To put it bleakly, yes, you will die if you don't sort out your nutrition while you're in university. You cannot stay for 3 years eating ramen noodles. And they learn to do their washing and dishes and everything. All of the life experiences there. That's what you need to be learning at university. And the education part of it is just a kind of bonus. And at the end of it, if you don't go into a field with your degree, you don't need to feel bad, because most jobs at the moment, if they have a degree requirement, they won't have a specific degree requirement. They just want to know that you can apply yourself at a certain level. And so that's the kind of thing. It doesn't necessarily matter that they're making their degree choice at the age of 13, but I think it's still the wrong way to do it, and there needs to be more practical stuff taught in schools. You should be able to fuse a plug and pay a bill and everything like that before you leave secondary school.
Well, the problem with industries is they are actively discouraging this type of thing. You look at the number of products that come with fitted plugs these days, where you can't change the fuse on them. You look at the number of technology devices that are becoming more and more hardware locked, particularly things like consoles and stuff are hardware locked.
But learning to change a fuse isn't learning to change a fuse, it's learning about electronics as it applies to a fuse. I mean, we got taught Pythagoras' theorem in age of 12. Yes, I've used Pythagoras' theorem and I've used algebra and everything like that, but I've used it in things which I learnt much, much later on. I could have been taught algebra and Pythagoras way back then. If I'm going to be taught something which I'm not actually going to use, I'd much rather be taught how to fuse a plug.
But yeah, there's, as I say, there's so much that discourages this type of thing. I mean, my car, for example, I know that a lot of parts of my car are less user serviceable. They have these sort of security fittings, things. Likewise, again, with electronics, you have these security screws that come with these things these days.
You don't need to teach someone to build an engine. You need to teach them to change a tyre, to put the oil in, to do the basic maintenance type stuff. And same, accountancy. You need to learn how to run a checkbook. Or
I don't know about accountancy, simple finances. The number of people I know who don't know how to manage their own finances.
Yeah, exactly. And they are going to get a huge shock because there's not going to be someone holding their hand in the real world. They need to learn, they need to be taught in school, I think, how to manage your incomings, your outgoings, how to record everything in the right way, how to keep receipts. You need to keep your receipts, people. Like, that's just all invaluable stuff, and it's never taught. It used to be taught in school. It used to be
It's very hard to keep receipts these days. I think we need to move to a new system than paper-based receipts, whether that be digitalization of receipts or a more detailed transaction ID recorded when you pay by card. Because paper-based receipts become increasingly cluttered, increasingly creased, and
well, yeah, that's true, but you don't need to keep paper-based receipts. You can digitize them yourself with a smartphone.
Indeed, this is true.
You can get a piece of cardboard, there's guides online, you can build a scanner out of a smartphone, basically just from a cardboard box and a smartphone.
You don't even need that. I mean, apps like Evernote, for example, have a document reader facility whereby you can set it up to auto-detect documents. Point your camera at, say, a receipt, or especially business cards. I know they do this with business cards. You can point it at a business card. It will read that it is a business card. It will detect the data from it, such as phone numbers and things, and extract that for your use, as well as digitalizing the business card itself. So these systems, again, need to be much better implemented for transaction receipts.
Yeah, the cardboard box framework is literally just to keep your phone still and oriented right and everything like that, so it just makes it easier if you're doing a large amount of it. But yeah, there is these systems in place, like you said, Evernote, and there's a lot of other apps that you can do.
Yeah, Evernote's definitely not the only one that does it. Yeah. That's just one example I know off the top of my head.
So you can keep receipts and digitise them and not have to worry about the paper so much. Anyone running business will still have to keep the paper copies because, hello government, it's 2014, please update your regulations, but that's kind of how things are at the moment. We've got to wait for things to become much more standardised.
Yeah, I mean, the number of things I've seen recently that, especially smaller systems, will often, when proving your ID, will require you to show a utility bill or something or a bank statement or something along those lines. Now, alongside a photo ID to prove that's you and your address and things.
Yeah.
Now, that's much harder when you've switched over to paperless billing. I found this a sort of few months back. I forget what it was for, but I was asked to provide a document showing my address, an official document showing my address, be it a utility bill or bank statement, and I couldn't find any because the majority of my things these days come through e-billing.
Yeah.
Now,
Couldn't you print one off?
Well, that's what I did eventually, or I found one, I forget, but printing one off then almost breaches that security because it's very easy to fake something when you're printing it off. So
yeah, but I suppose with proper letterheaded type stuff, it's a bit harder to fake. But
well, yes, but let's say I don't know. For example, it says our local water company, Southwest Water. Let's say it's letterheaded with Southwest Water and it has a water bill on it, but it's printed out from a computer. There's no proof that that's your address. It may well be your actual water bill. Just the address changed on it.
Yeah, but I could get a copy of someone else's bill and create one on the computer and print that off. So it's really not a secure system anyway. What they need to be doing is taking your ID and have a check in place that instead of checking your water bill or utility bill, they need to go to XYZ company and say, is this person living at this address?
But then that goes back to what we were saying earlier about the Orwellian future with checking out, who are you, all this database of who you are, where you are, what you're doing.
But that stuff is already in place. I mean, you look at how much data of experience
credit
checks have about
True,
you.
but for all intents and purposes, you do not want to encourage these things because
I think better access to data which already exists is not a bad thing.
Access to it, yeah, I suppose.
As long as it's controlled and safe and secure and it doesn't breach your rights. But here's the thing, there's no way to really do that, I don't think, because if I say to someone, here's my ID, and you can use this system to check that I live at that address, what's to stop them keeping that permission and checking I live at that address 3-4 times a month or whatever? Or what's to stop them claiming that I gave them permission and just getting my details anyway? So, I don't know. There's a lot of data online at the moment, and the only reason no one's been talking about it recently, or up until now, is that the data is worthless because of its magnitude. There's so much data there, no one can possibly collect it all together and pin it on someone. But now there's a new technology called big data, which several companies are investing in, and it's how, what was it called? The Intel, or Dell, or one of the companies, they made a robot which, I think it was Intel, they made a robot which competed at Jeopardy. Watson was what they called it.
I don't remember which company it was, but I vaguely recognise what you're talking about.
Yeah, so the way this thing works is it's not given the answers, it's just taught how to read big data. And what it can do is it can do a simple online search through Google or whatever, and collate all the data it receives from that and come up with an answer. And its actual purposes in medical type scenarios, I think that's one of the ways they're utilising it, but it will do the exact same.
Oh, sure, that's a good idea. Give them the symptoms and Google it.
Well,
you're dying!
That's exactly what they're doing, and the reason this is different from WebMD is because it has context. It can go through the big data sources and find the context and make a good enough diagnosis for you just to go to your doctor and say, okay, I think this is wrong with me, can we look into this? And it's going to tell you that you've got cancer a whole lot less than WebMD does.
True, I mean, obviously the danger is as you say, it will need to be smart enough to distinguish the downplaying as well as the upplaying, where so as to not underdiagnose.
Well, it's designed
as you say, with enough big data, as you say, and with enough big data, it should negate the underplaying as much as the overplaying.
So yeah, it's a
unless you really do have like a really rare random disease, but then again, it's no more inaccurate, then
Going
to your local GP,
In
who
fact,
will.
It's probably better than that, because your local GP will probably specialise in one area and have a general knowledge of base level stuff, and he will run you through a standard set of tests, and if he doesn't quite know what's wrong, he'll send you to a specialist, and that specialist may not know what's wrong with you either, because it may not be something within their remit, but you will just get bounced from department to department until they find a specialist who does recognise your symptoms. And this big data, it will probably be able to ask enough questions that it can narrow it down much, much quicker. And at least if it says you've got a rare disease and you don't, you're not going to complain too much about that. You just go to your GP and you say, okay, this is what I know, and this is what I think. And then they do the test for this rare disease, and maybe you've got it, maybe you don't. But there will be second guesses and third guesses and fourth guesses from Watson, and he will be able to narrow it down a lot more after the initial diagnosis is proven or disproven. So big data in terms of things that we want it to do is fantastic, but it also means that all of these government departments who hold data about us individually, they can now talk to each other, and they can comprise it together. And
Can is different to do or will, but still.
Well, if it benefits the government, it will benefit them. Well, they will make moves to sort it out if it benefits them. If it benefits us that they're slow on the uptake. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, big data is a scary topic, and I've only just skimmed the surface, so I don't even know the most scary stuff about it. But
Oh yeah, I mean, at 50 minutes already, it's probably a topic we
probably can't go into.
can go into in too much detail, but
Especially since the inevitable conclusion is talking about how Facebook holds all your data.
oh yes, of
Or
course.
the NSA, or GCHQ is our security service over here. Well, sort of security service. They do a similar role to the NSA, but with a smaller remit.
Well, with the exception of the controversy last year about them outsourcing a lot to the NSA.
Yeah. But,
without any filters on it. But regardless, that's beside the point again, as we say.
yeah. So I think big data is kind of the conclusion to any discussion on technology right now. That is the future. It's going to get much, much bigger. And have you heard of the Internet of Things?
Indeed, of course.
Yes, for anyone who doesn't know, the Internet of Things is aimed at putting internet connectivity in every single device you own.
Simple things like the Philips Hue is a light bulb that has Wi-Fi connectivity, so you can turn it on and off.
Yeah.
For example, and likewise, there are light switches, plug sockets. The idea being is that in the olden days, I say the olden days, I know people who still do it. If you're leaving your house, you may have one of these old clockwork plugs that you plug something in to put a light on and off to make it look like there's someone home. Whereas the idea is these days you can now put your heating on when you're on your way home, so it's warm by the time you get home. You can these things are developing, so you can put your kettle on to as you're reaching the end of your road, so it's boiled by the time you've unlocked your door.
But that's all the beginnings of the Internet of Things. The big idea is that it goes in everything, in your shoes, in your clothes, in your hair product. Will have nanobots, and like the nanobots in your hair product will tell you that your scalp's dry and you should buy another product at great expense to yourself. And like all of these things will communicate, and you'll have I think Google are working on this actually. They're working on a form of nanotechnology which you inject in your skin, and it goes around your bloodstream, and then they've got a special device which it will collect them all together, and they can relay information back into a computer or something. And
well, this has been predicted by sci-fi for a long time.
Yeah.
I can think of several games off the top of my head, which I won't bother to mention, but where they have blood nanites or blood such things, or microbots or whatever they happen to call them in context.
Yeah.
But
I don't think these things are actually robots or intelligent computers so much, but the way that they react and interact with each other will allow them to relay information back to a central computer, which can then diagnose medical conditions, which is just absolutely fascinating. I've had no idea how it works, but imagine something like that, but for everything you wear, everything you own, every product you buy, every food you consume, you will be able to have a running total of your exact calories that you've eaten and burnt during a day, and your fridge will be able to, well, I say your fridge will be able to order stuff. Every single year at the Consumer Electronics Show, there's this big hubbub about a fridge which will reorder stuff when it's low, and it's every single year. Yes, the fridges can do that. No one really wants them. They're handy, but they're far too expensive right now, so probably stay away from CS for a couple of years, bring the price down.
Also, that doesn't take into account things like deals, preferences. I mean, you may prefer one product to another, but that doesn't mean you want to buy it every time if another product is cheaper. Or likewise, if you prefer something, if it may be the second cheapest product, but you might prefer that over a cheaper variant. And
well, I imagine for now it can all go to a computer and build a shopping list, and you sort through it and choose what you want and then send it off. But in the future, imagine a virtual assistant doing that. Kind of, you're driving to work and your virtual assistant pops up and says, "Oh, by the way, you're out of bananas. Do you want this brand or that other brand?"
Oh, by the way, you've just eaten your last banana. I'm not home. Who's eating my bananas?
I thought you were going to go a bit darker. You've just eaten your last banana. You're about to crash. You should have been paying attention on the road instead of driving, or at least let Google drive you places.
Well, yeah, but
that's the other thing with big data. Imagine every single car on the road is relaying data back to a central point, and they're all communicating with each other. So it's like the TomTom type stuff, except even bigger and everywhere. So you know when there's a traffic jam ahead, you know when there's roadworks, you know when there's been an accident, you know when there's dangerous conditions. All of that is relayed by the car.
A lot of these things are already in place, as you say, by TomTom, Garmin. These companies have these systems in place. It's just they will become much more advanced
and much more automated and
much more automated, much more reactionary, much quicker to be on the uptake. As soon as one Google car sees an accident, it will relay it to the next car, which will reanalyze the situation and say, "Oh, it's only a minor accident, it'll be cleared within a few minutes," or "It's a major accident, this road's closed," and divert all the cars away, creating much less of a traffic jam, creating much less stress on those emergency services reacting to the scene, creating a clear path for the emergency services to get there, which will save lives. Big differences there.
And that's where the power of automated cars actually come into its own, because humans are stubborn and they're probably going to ignore a computer telling them to do something. But
I mean, I'm very resistant to the idea of automated cars on the concept of control. We've had this conversation many times on the basis of which is safer.
I think we should save that for another podcast.
Yeah, that's definitely a topic for another podcast. But as you say, there are even me who's resistant to them can see definite advantages.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just the way that they're implemented. I mean, Google and the car companies are both going at this from the opposite end. Google is trying to produce a driverless car, and the car companies are taking a car and adding in more technology to it.
I think there is a happy medium. I'm not comfortable with a fully driverless car, but I'm happy with a automatic assisted vehicle at the moment. And I think there is a happy medium. But again, as we say, let's not do that. We've come a nice full circle back to the wonders of modern technology, which was our starting point, and the Internet of Things. So the Internet.
Yeah. And we could do a whole podcast on the Internet of Things as well. But
indeed. So maybe we should start noting some of these down and putting them as topics. We'll do that in a bit, maybe.
Yeah. But for now, I think we should end the podcast.
Oh, and anyone who happens to listen to this and has any ideas that they think might be good, feel free to throw comments our way. We love criticism, even if there's criticism and constructive criticism, anything.
Yeah, if you've got ideas for another podcast or something you want to hear us talk about, please put it in the comments.
We'll go. Have any ideas for our future podcast? Why not email in?
Okay, yeah.
Or message us in the comments, whatever.
Yeah, that kind of works as well. But thank you very much for watching.
Thank you indeed.
Until next time, don't feed the trolls.